Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks for everyone for coming this evening. I know it's late in the evening. We'll try not bore you too much. We may even walk down through the crowd and have a bit of fun. So I kind of reached out to Phil a couple of months ago when we were thinking about this, and I suppose around the whole thing of, mentoring especially, and both of us were talking about how we've mentored people, one-on-one around open source. And then I also mentioned about a Jumpstart program we had inside an IBM that started a couple of years ago and how it grew from that. And, both of us, our experiences and stuff, so we'll kind of work through that. So to start with, Phil has put that up. I work over at IBM. I've worked in open source communities for nearly the last 10 years. And I get a great kick out of it.
Yeah, so Phil Estes, I'm a principal engineer, as mentioned, at AWS. Both of us are old guys, so we've been around software.
Speak for yourself.
A very long time. But both of us are young, maybe, in a sense, in open source, the last 10 years.
Young at heart.
And so one thing we thought we'd start with is kind of like that transition point for both of us. Like, what was our origin story? How to get into open source? So for me, roughly 10 years ago, I was kind of transitioning internally to a new role. IBM had gotten involved in various open source projects. OpenStack was big at that time. Cloud Foundry, and the year I kind of was making the shift, this new whale-based company showed up along with this big open source project, Estes format this year, a few talks ago, talking about some of that. I got very involved in the Docker project. I dove in, I loved it. It was my first real contribution experience, like submitting PRs, fixing bugs, and I just loved it. And that's led to the last 10 years being involved in this container space with the CNCF, OCI, Containerd, which is a component of Docker that was spun off. So that's my origin story. What about you, Martin?
Yeah, so a little bit like Phil, I was working on a downstream project that was built on top of OpenStack. It was Cloud Orchestrator project. And a manager came to me, and at the time I was helping to extend the OpenStack dashboard, which was called Horizon. And the manager came to me one Friday evening and said, would you like to go to the OpenStack conference the following week? Now, I think someone fell off the bus, obviously, that were supposed to be on it and didn't decide to go. So, I don't know, I just took the opportunity. I said, yeah, I'll go. I didn't know what I was going for. And I was just blown away. It was a massive conference to me at the time. It was about 8,000 people. I knew nobody. And it's the collaboration that blew me away between all the different companies. And then as the years went on, then I started working in different areas. There was also Elastic at an open source community. If anyone here ever heard of that? Yeah, it was Elastic Stack at the time. Unfortunately, a bit of a licensing problem there we won't go into. And then I came into the Kubernetes space, our ecosystem, and then around Helm became a maintainer and stuff. And really, I think it was, to see, especially as well when I went into Helm, the way I was always included into these environments, being able to do stuff from day one, and always the attitude was, we had coming from the company was, bring some to the table, talk is cheap, contribute.
Yep. So you were going to talk through, one of the things we wanted to set the stage for was really, why do companies need open source involvement, and so you were going to kick off with some of the whys. I'm in your way.
No, you're okay. Okay, Phil. He's just a bit taller than me, and when I stand beside him, I look even smaller. So when we look at it, probably one of the key points today is, and I think if we stand back from it is, there is very, very few software products and services out there that's not built, that their stack doesn't have some open source component in it. And if we think about Log4j, and this isn't, to give out about the bug that was in it or the one person that was trying to maintain it. a lot of companies suddenly saw from maybe their fridges at home to pieces of their car to everything had it stuck somewhere in it because, you know, Java is ubiquitous and Log4j was all over the place, okay? So it does shows us that we're building because, you know, when I started out a long time ago with hair, you know, a younger looking person, you know, we built products that were small and you could build them within companies. It's not that way anymore. We've realized once we got into the cloud space, and now we're coming along with AI and the whole lot, we want more and more. People want more and more. They're consuming more and more technologies, and not one company can do that. And that's the big point to this is that working in the communities, we're getting a lot of support through, you know, you'd have to employ thousands and hundreds of thousands of folks to do some of the work we get from some of the communities. And a lot of our customers today have become really clued in and realized that, right, we don't want lock into one company. So if you look at the cloud space, they like to say, right, will that product now work on AWS? What happens if I want to go to Google in the morning? What happens if I want to go to Azure, the IBM cloud, wherever I want to go? Can I do that? So they want that interoperability. And we really saw that over in OpenTelemetry. Hands up anyone that knows about OpenTelemetry. So OpenTelemetry, I won't say it's the final, but it's one of the first standards among the many standards in observability and telemetry that's eventually beginning to stick with vendors. Vendors have pushed it, and you can see now that that customers that want to generate telemetry data, they can now do it in a standard format, and they can plug and play whatever backend is their preference at the time. Sorry, he's got a nice clicker.
No problem. Yeah, so kind of to tag onto that, you know, there's a bit of data. If that didn't convince you, Red Hat did a really interesting report just a year and a half ago that said that 82% of all their responses they received, 82% of enterprises are more likely to pick a vendor that they see being active in open source. So not, you know, Martin just said, it's not that you build on open source, everybody builds on open source. But these enterprises said, I want to choose a company who's actively involved in communities, who they're contributing in some way. And then Red Hat kind of dove into, okay, you say, you know, 82% of you said you would like to pick a vendor who's active in open source. Why? And so these percentages down here were, of all the answers, you know, about half of them said, well, I like that because that means they're familiar with open source processes, or I like that because that means when I pick this vendor, they can probably influence that community in a certain way. They can get them to, you know, change kind of the direction of the project or add a new feature. And Martin, you had a great story about number 4, just when there's problems, they know they can rely on you to actually solve them.
This is like the one where you start with, I got a great joke, and at the end of it, nobody laughs. So I wouldn't say it's a great story, but about a year and a half ago, I was working with a partner, and we work a lot with partners now, and the great thing about partners are they're incredibly technical people. So if you're a partner out there, well done. And they know their, I was going to say the wrong word, stuff. I was going to say, you know, something else. But anyway, they were incredibly on the ball. They were getting involved with operators, Kubernetes operators, and they were using the operator SDK, and they came to an issue and found the bug. And unfortunately, I was gone home for the day. It was the end of my timeline. They were in the States. And they raised an issue out in the open source community. They knew exactly what they're doing. And I came in the next morning to, you know, my email on fire because, oh my goodness, they found an issue out here. We need to look at this or whatever. And I just said, that's just outside in the open source community. I'll just go out there, took a look at the issue, eventually found where it was, talked out to the community, said, oh yeah, it looks like a bug. Maybe look at it for a solution here, work through the solution. We got it in about a day or two. But for that partner, it was really important that we were technical savvy out in the community. Because at the end of the day, you know, I know for a lot of us, you know, when we drive our car, we don't really care a lot of the time what's under the hood. You know, if you're a petrol head now, sorry, you probably love it. But you know, we like to turn on the engine and, you know, off we go. But for folks like that, if they're going to be building on a stack and you're saying that, you know, you're open source ready and you know you're open source, well, you better know you're open source because folks will catch you out.
Yeah, so that's kind of the company side, and then Martin, you're going to talk through what it means for an employee.
Yeah, and I think this is the one that got us the idea that we may talk on this is, you know, and this is something really dear to my heart because, you know, when I started out in open source communities, it's the help from folks, you know, that I think you call it in the state pay it forward. Yep. Yeah, we just say helping each other at this side of the world, but but I really think, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, sometimes when you're with your own people or you're in the four walls of your own office, you're sometimes not as recognized as when you go outside of that. So what I mean by that is, when you go out into open source community, what I mentioned there earlier is, you know, don't be bringing nice slides and good talking on the phone. Talk is cheap. You bring your contributions. And as you bring those contributions, and that can be code, it can be test, it can be, you know, websites, it can be anything. But you're bringing stuff to that community. We as maintainers love that. We love someone that comes in there and starts doing stuff. And we especially love people, you know, that roll up the sleeves. And, you know, what I always call it is, you know, if you look out the back of a day and your drains are full and it's coming up the drains, you roll up those sleeves, you get the pipes out and you clean those pipes. That's what it's about, doing the work that, you know, maybe others don't want to do. And this creates those opportunities for you. And remember, when you're doing it, it's all out in public. So that's a fantastic point of view. So no one can ever say, you know, I did that. When you go, hang on a second, you can see my GitHub PR, like, you know, you can see the work I did in that. And it creates a great atmosphere because, you know, everyone wants collaboration in and working together. And if someone has worked with you, you're willing to say, hang on, you know, this person helped me. Like, I can say here, without Phil here, I probably wouldn't have this talk, you know, but, you know, that kind of way. But on a serious note, it builds with that. And I suppose the last thing I'm going to touch on, look, you know about the technologies, you're going to get exposed to different technologies, but the big one I want to touch on is around the friendships and recognition. So, and a quirk of fate, me and Phil worked at the same company, all right, the Atlantic Ocean separated us, but we did not meet each other until we were at a particular OpenStack conference a number of years ago. There's a person I knew he was co-speaking with, and they introduced each other. And over the next number of years, we never interacted at work, you know, within our own work areas. We just meet at conferences. And that just tells you, and the friends I've made in different communities over the years, I meet them from time to time, they ask me how I'm getting on, and some of the greatest fun I've had with is, you know, people I've spoke with from other companies or whatever, so I think it's great that way.
Yeah. And Martin always makes me take an old man selfie with him when I meet at conferences. So we've hopefully, maybe we're preaching to the choir, like, we know open source is important, we want to get involved. What does it look like? You know, what does it mean to have an open source culture? And obviously there could be a ton of different things, but these are ones that we felt, you know, were critically important. One is just that contribution back. You know, it's not just consuming open source. We know everyone's consuming open source. What are you doing to enable employees to give back, to have time, to be able to, you know, work in communities? Your company might create open source projects. You may be able to actually launch new ideas in open source. And again, you know, if you're here for the last panel, obviously that's fraught with all kinds of things you're going to have to weigh out about commercial product versus project. But if you're, you know, if your company's large enough to sustain that, and then really having a way for employees to grow and even be promoted through work in open source, which is, again, you know, in traditional enterprises, that can be a bit bit tricky because promotion processes usually have to do with, hey, I have launched this product and it brought in this X million dollars, or I made this, set of customers happy. And so finding ways that your company can enable open source people to be as successful as others is a critical part of having a good, positive open source culture. Along with that is just that there's value and incentive to actually do that work over and above some other role in the company. And so that may mean involving HR and understanding how, to tie in the same value and incentive system that there might be for working on other products at the company. And then, Mark just mentioned working with partners, but just the idea, does your company think about collaboration in open source with your vendors, with your partners, with your customers? And I know that's happening at IBM, that's happening at AWS. We're actually inviting some of our customers to meet us upstream and do that work there, rather than have some private contract where we develop something in-house.
Yeah, so how then, which is probably the key. So, we've probably been, rambling on here for the last while, and you're saying, oh, that's all great now. But how are we going to do this? And what's the way to do it? So, I mentioned there a couple of years ago, two of my colleagues, Anne Graham and Matt Rosowski, came up with this open source jumpstart program. And the idea behind it was for early professionals that were coming into the company, they'd get this opportunity to be walked through the open source process and how to get a PR out there. So hands up here who's pushed a PR out into the community. Any community at all. Come on, Alexander, I see you there. Yep. Now, hands up if you can remember the difficulty in first getting that first one out there. Do you remember that anxiety where you kept checking, doing a refresh, or you had your phone of a night out and you go, come on, get in there. And it is real. It's not that easy. Like we talk, sometimes it's easy, but it is hard to get your PR out there. And to be able to help someone through it bit by bit is great. The program we do is about 9 weeks. You start off with first, giving the proper practices, how to behave, etc., out in communities, and then what particular communities that are there. We give overviews of that and the mentors that are there. And then over the next 7 weeks, I think it is, then we work through every week we do a stand-up. And as I always say to the folks, okay, this is not school. If you haven't the stuff done, you've got family or commitments with the day-to-day or whatever, don't worry, but keep coming and we'll get you there. And some of the folks, PR straight away, I call them the hares, and then some of them, it takes more time. So it's like the hare and the tortoise story. There is no rush. The key here is the journey, okay? Bringing you on that journey and exposing you to the process is the most important. But this requires as well informing the company and the company being aware of the benefits of open source. So first of all, it's floating around, people know about open source. And then second of all then, having that process there, having your OSPO showing the tools and the processes that are involved. And you can hear today when we hear about inner source has become the new trendy. It's probably the new, I don't know. What's trendy at the moment? You sure? Why am I looking at you? I was talking about clothes. Anyway, whatever the coolest gear is at the moment, I'm looking over this guy, he's as old as me. But anyway, it's got so cool. And really, what is inner source? It's open source with a different word at the front. So they're just taking all the good things we've been doing for years out there because they work, because they have to work, because, when we collaborate with people out there, we're not paid in the same company. You don't have to do something with me, or I don't have to do something with you. We do it for the greater good, and we do it because we work well with each other. The last two, I mentioned the education. That's really, really important, having a program and so forth. And then eventually, and Phil really touched on this, is you have to have something in place where it's going to, give back to someone when they've done well out in communities. What's the nice word for that again? Probably, I don't want to use incentivize, but have something in place where, you know, promotions and so forth can be built on open source communities. Because I've got to ask you something, you know, and most of us here probably have worked in enterprise. Yes, when you get a product out the door, that's challenging and you do very well. But is that any more, you know, challenging than somebody who has fixed CVEs out in an open source community? I think both of them, you know, are on the same level. Or they've done, I don't know, they've got a release out the door of an open source project and really push that through. It's the same thing. You're making serious contributions to get something out there, and they should be at the same level. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And you know, we were going to wrap up with just kind of where we've come in 10 years. And you know, one of the things that I love about where I am now is this is something I was involved with in my last year at IBM. Was actually working with HR on an open source definition for a role in the guidelines at IBM, and now at AWS we have an open source talent task force led by our open source program office. We have representation from HR and from executive leadership, and again, the whole idea there is to make it natural for employees to work on open source and to get all the same benefits and to have the ability to grow in their roles, to grow in their career. And so, you know, Martin and I are both, you know, we've got some leadership roles in open source, we've become maintainers, but the amazing thing is that we now have the opportunity to give back, to mentor others. I've been able at AWS to build a small team of young engineers that I'm teaching, you know, just how to work in communities, how to, not just the nuts and bolts of PRs, but, you know, all those skills about influencing people that you don't control. You don't, you know, it's just other people that you're collaborating with. And so that's an exciting place to be for us.
We should probably say a prayer for those poor people you're training, are we?
Yeah, you're right.
Sorry, Phil.
So yeah, it's an awesome place to be in. So if you're in a place at your company where, you know, you've kind of worked up through the rungs of the ladder of gaining some credibility, gaining some trust from communities, then pass that on. Find a way to mentor someone else at your company to do that.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Phil said there, the thing that gives me the biggest joy these days, you know, outside of a nice chocolate cake that's gluten-free, celiacs we don't want very much, is the ability to be able to help people. You know, when people come to me and they say, you know, they're overawed, and like, I tell a story about a couple of years ago, I was mentoring someone and they came to me because they heard I was in Helm, and they said, I want to get into Helm, I want to do Helm. So I said, great. And this was our first one-to-one, and I went, write down the 5 open source projects you really want to work on and come back to me next week. And you could feel the silence on the line, you know, what the hell? You could feel this mentor. He's not a mentor. So off he went anyway, and that was grand. I went back the following week anyway, and he wrote out the 5. Helm was not in any of the 5. So that was grand. He wanted to work on Tensor, or what you call it? No. Oh. No. What's the CI/CD? Cloud native? No, sorry? Tecton. Thank you very much. See, I told you they were falling asleep. Okay. Yeah, this worked, all right. I've seen this trick with a magician before. All right, I had forgot Tecton actually, so sorry about that. So he went off working on Tecton and he pushed a few PRs and he seemed to be doing okay. But about 5-6 months in, I hadn't seen him move into like a committer or a serial contributor. You know, the reviews weren't flowing as well, and he seemed to be going a little bit stale. So a while after that, I talked to him and I said, look, what's the story? Do you know, tell me what it is. And he goes, I didn't know how to tell you, but I don't like Tecton that much. Now, this is not an insult to Tecton. He says, I'm not enjoying it. So I said, grand. Go away again, five things again and come back. So he came back then with K8 of the following week. And the minute he went on to Knative, he just took off like a rocket. It's been fantastic out in open source communities. But that's what gives me the buzz, is the ability to be able to do that now. And also teams within the company who come to me and ask, give me some advice around open source or the way to do things. And really the key is simple, be a nice person and do it right, essentially. So we finishing up?
Yeah, I think we're super close, or maybe we're over time. Yeah.
What? Can we just do the takeaways? Because we started late. Yeah, go on. What do you think, folks? Do you want to hear the takeaways quickly? Look at that. You do not want to get the crowd against you, Matt. Okay, let's go with it quickly. At the end of the day, it's the yin and yang. If you're going to use open source, give back into it, because then you won't have any nasty surprises afterwards. The last two, really for me, collaboration is the greatest. And it creates that teamwork. It creates that ability that you can bring back into your company if it's going a bit stale. And finally, it's a great way to help employees to grow their careers and grow as people on it. So, yeah, I think all in all, it's great.
Yep. Thank you. We're out of time. But
Thank you very much.